He stood barely 5 feet tall, a fisherman from a quiet coastal village in the Philippines. His days were spent mending nets and navigating the local waters, a life far removed from any conflict. Yet, a quiet determination simmered beneath his unassuming demeanor, often mistaken for meekness by others. He had heard the whispers, the dismissive comments about Filipinos being too small to ever truly contend. Such remarks rarely provoked an outward reaction, but they settled deep within him, a persistent, silent weight. He understood the world often overlooked his people's resilience, forged by generations of quiet struggle. Soon, his peaceful life would confront an overwhelming presence, testing if true strength was measured in size. The fisherman's daily life was a quiet cycle of mending nets and navigating familiar coastal waters. His small stature, often overlooked, was no impediment to his profound connection with the vast ocean. Still, dismissive whispers about his people's perceived weakness echoed, a persistent, unwelcome hum. This wasn't merely personal disregard. It felt like a disrespect to the enduring spirit of his community. He bore this silent burden with quiet resolve, rarely revealing its emotional weight. However, increasing reports of foreign vessels intruding upon their traditional fishing grounds began to chip at his composure. His tranquil existence was now threatened by an approaching storm far greater than any typhoon. The fisherman, accustomed to the rhythm of the waves, found his internal peace increasingly disturbed by the escalating challenge. He carried the weight of his community's quiet concerns, observing the distant silhouettes of foreign ships growing bolder each day. The dismissive remarks about his people's stature, once mere background noise, now resonated with a sharper, more unsettling effect. His hands, calloused from years of pulling nets, clenched at the thought of losing their ancestral waters to an unseen, powerful influence. This wasn't just about fish. It was about the very identity and survival of his island home. He understood that enduring silence, while a strength, could also be perceived as weakness in the face of such bold advancement. A profound, unsettling question began to form in the quiet corners of his mind, demanding an answer. Every morning the fisherman still cast his nets, yet the horizon held more than just the rising sun. Distant ships, once rare, now formed a constant, imposing fixture against the blue expanse. Their presence served as a daily, unspoken reminder of challenges, echoing that his people were too small. Each vessel encroached further, pushing his banca closer to shore, jeopardizing ancestral fishing grounds. He saw other villagers, their faces reflecting a similar, quiet desperation as livelihoods diminished. Pressure mounted, not only from the sea but from the growing sense their quiet endurance was misunderstood. A different struggle, one beyond physical stature, began to stir within him, quietly demanding an answer. Every sunrise brought the same cold reality to the fisherman's small village. The distant vessels now a permanent, imposing stain on the horizon. Each day the pressures regarding their physical stature seemed to grow louder, echoing in the relentless hum of the foreign engines that pushed his small banca further inward towards the crowded shore. His daily routine became a silent, weary protest, casting nets in ever-diminishing waters, a quiet act of defiance against the unspoken, overwhelming challenge. The encroaching ships were not just depriving them of fish and livelihood, they were eroding a way of life, a heritage passed down through countless generations of his people. He watched his neighbors, their faces etched with the same silent questions about their uncertain future and their deeply diminished pride. The relentless pressure from the sea was a constant, heavy weight, demanding an answer that simple physical strength alone could not provide. He knew the growing desperation in his community required more than just quiet endurance. It desperately needed a clear, powerful voice. Each day, the fisherman felt the village's collective spirit dimming under the shadow of the colossal vessels now permanently stationed offshore. The daily remarks, often broadcast across the water, specifically targeted their stature, echoing the ancient derogatory comments about their perceived weakness. He saw the younger men, once proud and boisterous, now walk with shoulders slumped, their customary laughter replaced by quiet frustration. This erosion of confidence was more devastating than any lost catch, threatening the very core of their ancestral identity and heritage. The relentless psychological pressure built with each passing tide, demanding a response beyond their usual quiet resilience and enduring spirit. He knew that continuing to endure in silence only validated the belief of those who pressured them that their people were indeed too small to matter. A growing conviction settled within him. The time for mere survival was ending. A different kind of strength had to emerge. One evening, the fisherman witnessed a sight that broke his long-held composure. A young boy from the village, no older than 7, openly wept after being taunted by older children. They echoed the very harsh words broadcast by the colossal vessels offshore, mocking the boy's small stature and perceived weakness. This wasn't just a child's humiliation. It was the public mirroring of their collective diminishment, eroding their spirit. The fisherman felt a deep, cold ache in his chest, recognizing the insidious way their identity was being targeted. Enduring silently, he realized, only validated the aggressor's belief that his people were indeed too small to matter. A different kind of response was now inevitable, one that demanded more than just quiet, internal strength. The fisherman stood by the shore, the young boy's cries still echoing in his mind. He had always believed in his people's quiet strength, their ability to weather any storm with dignity. But the boy's public distress, a direct mirror of the erosion of their collective spirit, shattered that long-held conviction. He saw how constant challenges from the colossal ships had strained the very fabric of their village, even affecting the children. The cold ache in his chest transformed from a dull sadness into a slow, burning indignation. Their profound resilience, he realized, would remain entirely invisible if never outwardly asserted. A new, unfamiliar resolve began to harden within him, demanding a more defiant declaration. The fisherman now felt a cold certainty replacing his long-held despair. The boy's tear-streaked face, shamed by the towering vessels, solidified his nascent determination into an unyielding resolve. He had accepted their plight as an unavoidable tide, but this public mockery had finally exhausted his patience. His people's quiet dignity, once their strength, now felt like a silent surrender to brazen disrespect. The fisherman knew true resilience meant not just enduring, but also knowing when to stand against the storm. A challenging thought, unthinkable for his peaceful nature, began to crystallize into a concrete plan. He would no longer wait for change. He would become the firm declaration their village desperately needed. Alan wasted no time. His resolution now demanded action. He moved through the village with quiet purpose, a new intensity replacing his resignation. His plan began with hushed conversations, visiting fellow fishermen in their small huts before dawn. He proposed a defiant act. They would sail out, not to fish, but to stand against the foreign ships. Fear was evident. The risk of harm or losing their boats to such powerful vessels was undeniable. Yet Alan's calm conviction, forged by years of quiet endurance, began to awaken a hesitant courage within them. Each nod was a silent, dangerous commitment, an unspoken declaration against an overwhelming, unyielding power. Alon's quiet resolve had ignited a fragile flame among the fishermen, now bound by a risky, unspoken pact. The next morning, a heavy silence fell as each man prepared his small vessel for an uncertain journey. Their families watched from the shore, fear etched on their faces, yet no one spoke of retreat. They gathered meager supplies, their fishing gear replaced by a desperate hope against the looming foreign ships. Every knot tied, every engine checked, became a quiet act of defiance against overwhelming odds. The small fleet, humble boats against giants, slowly pushed off from the familiar shore. The vast ocean awaited, holding the true measure of their courage and the unknown cost of their stand. A small fleet of fishing boats now navigated the vast, indifferent ocean, each vessel a tiny speck against the horizon. Every fisherman aboard understood the profound risk of their chosen path, heading towards an overwhelming presence. The initial quiet resolve was now a heavy weight, pressed by the endless expanse and the looming uncertainty. Their collective act of defiance carried a great cost, endangering not only their well-being but their families' survival. They moved forward with meager provisions, their usual tools replaced by an almost unbearable, urgent hope. Each engine throbbed a steady rhythm, pulling them closer to the colossal ships that awaited their arrival. The true measure of their courage would soon be tested against the formidable might they were deliberately approaching. The fishing boats pressed on, their small forms now visible to the distant, larger vessels. The ocean, once free, now felt like an arena where their vulnerability was starkly exposed. Suddenly, the radio crackled, an official warning echoing across the waves, demanding they turn back. Soon, a Chinese Coast Guard ship broke formation, cutting a path towards the lead Filipino vessel. An undeniable pressure. The fishermen watched, hands gripping worn wood, a silent defiance hardening their faces. The patrol boat then deployed a smaller craft, circling their fleet, creating disruptive wakes. The air grew thick with challenge as the gap between the two forces shrank, promising an unavoidable encounter. The smaller Chinese craft now weaved uncomfortably close, its engines churning chaotic swells around the Filipino boats. This forceful maneuver was a deliberate pressure tactic, a persistent assertion of control to break their resolve. Each disruptive wake rocked their fragile vessels, yet the fishermen held course, refusing to acknowledge the challenge. The gap closed, bringing the foreign crew's faces into stark relief, an unspoken challenge passing between groups. They gripped tillers tighter, worn wood warm beneath their palms, a silent testament to their resilience. A Chinese officer gestured, directing his crew to maneuver closer, attempting to block the lead Filipino boat. The air crackled, space shrinking to unbearable tension, poised on an impending encounter. Chinese vessel, larger and more powerful, now positioned itself directly in front of the lead Filipino boat. This deliberate obstruction forced the smaller fishing craft to cut its engine or risk a direct contact. On board, the Filipino fishermen exchanged quick, resolute glances, their faces etched with a mix of defiance and grim determination. They understood this was more than just a territorial dispute. It was a test of their will, their right to simply exist. The foreign crew watched them closely, anticipating a surrender, a break in their unwavering stance. Yet the Filipinos held their ground, their silence, a powerful, unyielding response to the escalating pressure. The standoff deepened, each side refusing to yield. the tension on the open water becoming almost suffocating. The larger Chinese vessel remained an imposing blockade, its gray hull a stark contrast to the small Filipino fishing boat. On its deck, the foreign crew observed, their expressions still expecting a sign of capitulation from the smaller craft. Yet the Filipino fishermen, though outnumbered and outsized, met their gaze with an unyielding quietness that spoke volumes. This silent defiance, unexpected by the powerful military presence, slowly began to shift the psychological dynamics of the standoff. No shouts were exchanged, no weapons drawn. Only the vastness of the sea witnessed this profound test of wills. The foreign officers, accustomed to immediate compliance, now found their carefully planned intimidation tactics yielding an unforeseen result. A subtle unease flickered across their faces as the Filipinos continued to hold their ground, their resolve unwavering against the immense pressure. The silence stretched, a heavy, unspoken challenge now defining the vast expanse of the sea. Aboard the Chinese vessel, officers exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence eroded by the small boat's resilience. They expected shouts or surrender, not the quiet, unwavering gaze of the Filipino fishermen. This steadfast defiance from the smaller craft, a speck against their hull, challenged every expectation. The confrontation shifted beyond a display of force, becoming a profound psychological battle. The foreign commander, accustomed to compliance, felt his intimidation tactics falter against this unyielding resolve. A palpable tension hung in the air, awaiting the moment one side would finally break the deafening silence. The silence finally yielded, not to shouts or aggression, but to a slow, almost imperceptible shift in the massive Chinese vessel's position. The foreign commander, his face a mask of unexpected restraint, issued a quiet command, and the powerful engines rumbled to life, signaling not an attack, but a deliberate retreat. The Filipino fishermen watched, their expressions still, as the imposing hull began to turn, slowly gaining distance from their small, resilient boat. There was no cheer, no triumphant cry from their side, only a shared, deep breath that felt lighter than moments before. The confrontation had ended, not with a clash of force, but with a quiet, undeniable acknowledgement of their unwavering stand. For now, the immediate threat receded, leaving behind a new understanding of their own quiet power and the strength found in steadfast defiance. Yet the vast sea remained, and the full implications of this encounter would ripple far beyond this single silent victory. The fishermen steered their small boat home, the vast sea now holding a different meaning. The colossal vessel's silent retreat left an indelible mark, a quiet victory etched into their memory. They carried not fear, but a newfound understanding of their steadfast courage under immense pressure. This encounter reshaped their perception of vulnerability, replacing it with quiet, unyielding strength. Their faces, weathered by sun and sea, now held a dignity transcending the tense standoff. The implications of their defiance would echo far beyond this event, challenging many notions. They knew this wasn't the end of their struggle, but a profound beginning to a different fight for their identity. The West Philippine Sea continued to stretch out an endless horizon, yet it felt profoundly changed. For the fishermen, their daily routine resumed, but imbued with a quiet, enduring strength. Their small vessels, once symbols of vulnerability, now navigated with an unspoken defiance. The silent retreat of the colossal ship had echoed globally, altering perceptions of their homeland. No parades or declarations marked their return, only the steady resolve etched on their faces. They understood their fight was ongoing, but its nature had fundamentally shifted from fear to purpose. Their small stature no longer invited doubt. Instead, it symbolized an unwavering spirit that had, against all odds, left even the powerful speechless.